Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Doyle, and this is the Verdigris Table, where we are talking about the finale of Dragons of Icespire Peak from the Dungeons & Dragons starter set. That's right, in this one, we're completing our walkthrough with the final chapter. Plus, we're going to talk about what you might want to do after this chapter closes to keep your game night going strong, and ways you can change the whole adventure up. So you're definitely going to want to stick with this one until the end. When it is finally time to send our heroes to the Clifftop Observatory to rescue Adron and face Sparkrender, you've likely been playing through this adventure for weeks, if not longer, so you could be forgiven for forgetting that the setup for this final leg of the adventure is on page 13, not at the start of chapter 4, where you might expect it. I don't know if I would have put it there, but it does give us the opportunity to revisit these individual quests and think of ways we can make the players feel like they are the protagonists of this story and not just strapped into an amusement park ride. We talked about this when we went over Dragon's Rest earlier in the series, so I'm not going to repeat all of that here. I will just add that after a few sessions getting to know these characters and the players around your table, the cool things you think up are probably going to be better than the generalized ones in the book, or even the recommendations that I provided. Thanks to Renara with the Moonstone key in hand, they have options on how to approach the observatory, and this is going to be your very last chance to use the encounters from the end of chapter 1 if you want to when you haven't yet. Whichever way they take, a shadow is going to pass over them, and they will look up to see this blue dragon soaring high above them. Does it see them? Well, no, but they don't know that at first, and this is your chance to put the fear into them. They're going to have to fight this thing, and you better believe, at least the way I run it, they're not going to catch Sparkrender napping. I would also describe on this approach the comet looking bigger and brighter than ever. The morning you set out is the first time you can see it during daylight. It must be very close. The observatory is giving me Castle Greyjoy, Iron Islands vibes, which I am into. The characters can climb up any of these spires and take this place in any order. And this kind of makes the Moon Key, Rainbow Bridge, and the puzzle of getting into D4 kind of irrelevant. But the players don't know that at first, so it's whatever. Wherever they start here, the first thing the characters will likely become aware of is this battle between Mech and Min and these Stirges at D2, because they're making some noise. This is classic encounter design, and worth remembering during your illustrious Dungeon Master career that lies before you now that you've gotten a taste for this hobby. It might seem boring at first glance. Kobolds and Stirges are not much of a threat now that we're level 3 plus. We've seen these monsters in this adventure before. But check this out. The question this encounter poses isn't, are the players going to win this fight? Or even, are the players going to run away or engage? This fight is already happening between two separate factions when we show up. This world is alive and dynamic even without the character's intervention. Now the players can choose to pick a side or hang back and see what happens. They might kill these kobolds or watch them get sucked dry or help them. What happens next is going to be impacted by the decisions they make and how they follow through with them. When the dust settles, I think I would straight up tell the players they think these are Mila's brothers if they don't connect the dots themselves, especially if they're lying there dead. If they survive and the players are nice to them or name drop their sister, then these guys are going to provide all of this information and explanation of the layout here. If they don't survive, I'd make it clear that these draconic effigies arrayed around the Rotunda here have got to be some part of ritual they were preparing. There is a slimmer chance they can get this lore dump out of the other kobolds at D3 as well. If the players engage Sparkrender before clearing these guys out, then I think they'll be joining within a round or two into that fight with Sparkrender in service of their master. D4, the isolated study, is a nice little palate cleanser of explanation. The clue to access D6 and the potion of resistance to lightning are going to be super helpful as long as we came here first. If you're taking my advice of letting the wizard learn augury as their character arc, I think I would put that spell in this scholar's journal as well. If you are not careful, it would be easy to look at the map and misinterpret the connection from the central rotunda to the tower where the dragons are as a bridge, but it is actually a platform on pulleys because D5 is 15 feet above the rest of this place. And this height separation is the explanation, at least in my mind, for why Sparkrender hasn't noticed our characters running amok in his little territory yet, and why they can't see him up there until they reach the top. Now, as written, Sparkrender is sleeping. They did the same thing with the dragon at the end of the Essentials kit, and man, do I hate it. Okay, it's a trope. It's Bilbo sneaking around, pilfering from Smaug. I get it. But in The Hobbit, if Bilbo and the dwarves all got the jump on the dragon, there's still no chance they'd kill it. Here, if the PCs get a surprise round, they could smoke our wormling before it gets to say or do anything. And that might feel pretty good to them in the moment, but it's not exactly a fulfilling or memorable conclusion to our story here. I'm all for giving the players meaningful choices and rewarding smart creative play. So if they decide they're going to hide out until they're convinced Sparkrender goes to sleep, all right, good plan. Let's see if you can pull it off. But I wouldn't make that the default since this is supposed to be our big climactic boss battle here, right? And here's this whole ritual spelled out. It's pretty much the largest section of this whole book. If Sparkrender dies, all of that just gets thrown out too. I would prefer a confrontation with Sparkrender here and at minimum have our big bad at least, take an action or talk. But in a perfect world, either the characters have to retreat and go lick their wounds somewhere, or the dragon flies off to take a long rest so that we can have a rematch later, this time while the ritual goes down. Here's a hack for you more experienced DMs, and by the time you've reached this finale, that includes you, even if you just started your Dungeons & Dragons career with this adventure here. You can adjust the enemy's hit points. You can change everything. It's no secret. I keep saying it. But upping the hit points of a monster is simple and usually will not break the game on you. Our blue dragon wormling stat block shows us they have 52 hit points, but that is just the average. Somewhere out there, there's one with max HP, which puts them at 80. So why not Sparkrender? Especially that first time we meet him, especially if you don't listen to me and you have the party catching him napping. That extra HP could be the difference between him living to fight another day and your big bad evil guy dying with a whimper instead of a shout. Even if you want to give your characters that satisfaction of curb stomping a sleeping dragon for free, which, okay, it's your table, and I am sure they will enjoy that. If you have that HP bar turned up to max, Sparkrender can still disengage, fly away, or even dive into the sea below, and we still get our epic ending. The party fighting alongside Adron against Sparkrender and some Kobolds if everyone's coming in full after a long rest. These dragon effigies around, crackling with magical energy, and the King Killer Comet shining overhead like a small second sun. If you're built anything like me, you probably want to do your best to tee this up, this big battle, to start off the final session of this adventure. I can understand why you might intuitively want to finish the night with this, but there's going to be a lot of moving pieces, and at least I would be better handling it fresh. There might be even more going on with your grand finale if you watch this one through to the end. So don't touch that dial or click away, I guess. Click like and subscribe. Sure, yes. But otherwise, sit back and keep watching. Starting a session with this big battle will also give you plenty of time after the fight to return to Dragon's Rest for a little celebration where you can wrap up any loose ends and maybe lay the groundwork for the next leg of your campaign. I already mentioned how Ghosts of Saltmarsh is nautically themed, and it features Orcus, and how that makes it a great follow-up to this, but what I didn't do was show you this map. Check it out, side by side with Stormwreck Isle. Just hop on the next boat that comes through Dragon's Rest, and off we go. I would just skip the haunted house and go directly to the lizard folk arc, which points you to the Sahaugen, who could easily connect to salvage operation, and the Abbey, because all of this Orcus business pushed them into new territory. But you could also send them to Phandalin and run Lost Mine of Phandelver. Maybe they sail to Neverwinter and meet Gundren Rockseeker there, and you could beef up, or just let them steamroll the Cragmaw hideout and skip ahead directly to Cragmaw Castle, which is built for level 3 characters. And Phandalin also lets you use everything from the Essentials kit, and with the Shattered Obelisk and or beyond the Dragon of Icespire Peak, you've got a year or more of game nights worth of material lined up ahead of you. There's a ton of other options as well. It's perfectly okay to take a little time after you finish this to select and prepare the next leg of your campaign. But if you can make this choice ahead of time, you can start to plant seeds and create connections to what's coming next. This also holds true, maybe even more so, if you want to do some homebrew for what comes next. Creating your own stuff is great. I'm a huge fan, but there is nothing wrong with using pre-published materials either. I've done a lot of homebrew. You can find a collection of some of my adventures and regional encounter tables on the DM's Guild. If you want some cool stuff or inspiration for cooking up your own cool stuff, I always put all of the pages in the full preview so you can access it all for free, though any purchase you make there is deeply appreciated and helps me keep making content like this series. And honestly, a lot of the time I prefer modifying existing materials because it's just more efficient and less time consuming. It helps me focus on altering the parts that matter most to me and my players instead of coming up with everything whole cloth. Now, I promised at the start that we'd go through the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle as written, and then we'd get into homebrewing this adventure. Well, my buddy, down under, the illustrious Matthew Perkins, has done a great series where he breaks this whole thing down and puts it back together with some new and really interesting pieces. He starts the player characters on the ship that wrecks on the island and spawns the drowned sailors. Adds a really cool drama dice mechanic that builds further connections to the story. You know how I feel about that. But I think the best part of his series is where he does the final ritual that we're talking about here. It is awesome. And I know because I helped him write it. Not only did we flesh out the ritual Sparkrender is doing at the end of this adventure, we actually built a series of other rituals dragons can perform and built game mechanics around those to create a sweet little PDF that you could use to fuel a whole campaign's worth of draconic magic and intrigue. You can check out his entire playlist here. Make sure you tell him that I sent you. Otherwise, maybe check out this video. Thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. I appreciate you, and there's some cool stuff on the way as thanks for all your support. I will see you all next time. Be kind and have fun.